Well, aloha and good morning. Happy Aloha Friday. It is another end to what has been so far a pretty good week here in Hawaii with the news of the continuing downward trend of the curve, or the flattening of the curve, I should say, and a beautiful day here in Honolulu. I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yanji Denise. Good morning, Ivan. Ivan asking, who is on today? Well, we are very lucky. We have President David Lassner, who is joining us in just a few minutes. This, of course, is the COVID-19 Care Conversation brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health. Both entities working to make Hawaii a better place, and we so appreciate their support as we get to use this platform with the Honolulu Star-Advertiser to bring you people like President Lassner to talk about what's happening with the COVID-19 response here in the islands. He made the announcement on Monday that classes are resuming in September, but they are going to be very different, Ryan.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be talking to him a little bit more about what students can expect when they head back to UH campuses. Again, not only at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, but throughout the entire system, and some of the changes that UH has had to implement in order to really adhere to that social distancing measures that we are seeing all businesses and all organizations and companies have to really implement into their new daily practices. So we'll talk to him about that, as well as some other topics that are impacting the University of Hawaii system. But we always like to start off with the count and sort of give an update on where we're at with that curve flattening and the new cases here in Hawaii.
Yeah, and great news, 2.5 weeks of single digits, 3 new cases of the coronavirus for a total of 629 positive since the outbreak began. What's wonderful to see is that 90% of those who've been infected have recovered. So we have an excellent recovery rate. So far, less than 2% of the 34,000 people who have been tested have tested positive. So we love to see that. We see some questions already coming in, and please start to write them in so that when President Lassner joins us, we can get right to it. And this is a question about athletics and if certain facilities are going to be open. And there's a lot of questions about that. How do sports proceed in a COVID-19 world?
That's right. So we want to, and a big announcement actually coming yesterday from the Manoa campus. We'll get to that as well. But first up, we want to welcome in President David Lassner to the conversation. Thank you so much, David, for joining us and for being here. First up, if you can sort of give a recap of the announcement that was made earlier this week and some of the changes that are going to be happening to the University of Hawaii system when you welcome back in students.
Sure. So what we announced this week was that we are resuming in-person classes for fall, but it will be highly modified so that we can protect the safety of our students and employees. So by highly modified, what I mean is we will be implementing social distancing practices in our classrooms, in our labs, in our libraries, in our study spaces. We'll be following whatever guidance is provided to us by public health officials, the state and the counties in which we have campuses. We will also be preparing, as we do that, for the possibility of another outbreak in the fall. So what we learned this spring is that our faculty and students were just amazing in adapting with almost no notice to go fully online right after spring break and for the rest of the semester. But it wasn't planned until the last 3 weeks or so before we went online. So we'll be using the summer to actually prepare our campuses, our faculty, our students for the possibility that there's an outbreak on one or more islands that causes us to have to revert to fully online during the fall semester.
Talking about what's happened so far, do you feel like students have been able to keep up with their studies? I know, especially at the, when we talked to Dr. Kishimoto, looking at the Hawaii public school systems, there's a real question about access to resources. Do students have enough resources at the university level to continue to participate?
So we have maintained access to resources. The biggest problem, as I understand it, with some of the DOE students was really access to computers and broadband at home. More of our students had such access. We also kept labs open on all of our campuses so that those students who did not have access could come in, typically to a library, to a computer lab, again, in a fully socially distanced manner so that we could help them complete their semester on time. Our advisors were available online, our faculty were teaching online, our support services were available online. So it was a pivot, not just for the classroom experience, but really for for everyone on our campuses. Within our dorms, most of our student residents left either to the mainland or to their homes on Oahu or on the neighbor islands. But we did keep some students wanted to live. They had nowhere safer to go. So they could have been an international student who couldn't get home or who might not have been as safe in their country as they are here in Hawaii. And for them, we continued to serve meals. They were to go or other forms of not being able to sit down restaurant style as they normally would in a student residence hall. So all of those adaptations were made on the fly, and we'll be prepared to make them again if we have to in the fall, but we're sure hoping not to.
What does dormitory life look like in the fall in this situation? Because you're going to have to implement these social distancing measures, but there's going to be people that have to live together in a dormitory, and some of those rooms are pretty small. How does that work, and how are you guys managing through some of those?
So we're working through how we'll do that now. Fortunately, we have about 3 months to prepare for our August 24th start of instruction. We know we will have many fewer students. So that gives us a lot of options to space them out quite a bit better than we would in normal times.
What are you thinking about enrollment in the fall? Are you expecting more students because there could be a number of students who used to go to school on the mainland who now want to join the UH system? Or are you thinking fewer students because of the concerns about COVID?
It's almost impossible to predict. So we're preparing for all of those eventualities. I think you hit the key factors though already. We do think that there will be a lot of interest from local students in staying home and their families, both because of the safety factor and wanting to be near family in case something goes wrong, and also cost. Particularly what we're hearing from a lot of students is, why do I want to pay to go to an expensive mainland university, especially if all I'm going to have is an online experience? So some of those students are thinking of staying home as well. I'd also like to say, you know, for those in our community, both the high school class of 2020, which those who graduate, you know, will be amazing students. To have made it through this school year out of our public high schools is a real testimonial to their strength and perseverance. It has been hard for them. We will welcome all of them. And frankly, to the extent many public high school students go straight from school into the job market, there won't be much of a job market for them starting this summer here in Hawaii. And the opportunity to go straight into higher education to better themselves. We know that people with a college degree, they make more money. A bachelor's degree is worth on average $1 million in lifetime earnings over a high school graduate. They are healthier, they live longer, they're less likely to become unemployed, they're more likely to get their jobs back quickly after a recession. For society at large, they draw on less social services, less likely to become incarcerated, they're healthier, they vote more, they volunteer more, their kids are more likely to go to college. It's a great investment, and especially when you can't get a job, that's a perfect time to make the choice to go to college, even if you weren't thinking about it. Our campuses are affordable, they will be safe, and there's opportunity on every island. We're also looking to those who have become unemployed, who may be thinking about this being the opportunity for a career change. And many of those who have become unemployed are in low-wage jobs, and maybe they would like to change professions. And the University of Hawaii and our campuses offer them that opportunity as well.
I want to get back to maybe, again, the logistical side, because we see some questions about social distancing. I'm thinking about like my time at UH, and some of those lecture halls are very big with, you know, a lot of people, a lot of chairs that are all tight. I mean, how do you manage some of those larger lecture halls, especially at UH Manoa?
So you're absolutely right. We have the option, we think, of using in a large lecture hall. If you can remember that far back, Ryan. We could probably use every third seat, for example, and achieve safe social distancing. But more likely, really what we're going to do is leverage the skills that we developed over this spring. And we learned a lot this spring in the forced transition to online. But we could give a lecture online as effectively, and in some cases more effectively, than in a large lecture hall. And then have the interactive portion maybe in smaller groups and socially distanced spacing where students could come in for discussions, but also do some of that discussion online as well. I think our faculty and students really learned a lot about what online environments are good for, and where we need a little more personal touch, and we can blend those together in hybrid, and there's a new term going around now, high flex environments, where students may be in a classroom, they may be at home, and they might shift between those two modes during the course of a semester, even in a given class.
I would also think that given how nice our weather is for so much of the year, are you anticipating holding some of those discussions outside?
Exactly. That's right. So fresh air is good, and you can socially distance very easily. Yeah.
I want to bring in a question from Keone. He's asking about just the overall operations side, the campus operations, money-wise, and employment opportunities, and just the overall UH budget, I guess, looking at it, with a lot dependent on maybe the state as well as tuition. If those numbers are down, how is that going to impact the operations of the system as a whole?
So what we're looking at is, frankly, scenario planning. We don't have facts. So we don't know what our operating budget is, primarily our state general fund appropriations. And as you know, the legislature is going back into session next week. They'll be making some decisions about that. The other half of our general operating budget is the tuition we receive. And your question about enrollment was astute. Not only do we not know the numbers, but we don't know the mix. And the non-resident students actually pay us a higher tuition rate, and so the more non-resident students we have, generally the more revenue we have to support our resident students, who tend to be supported by the general funds. So we're planning for multiple scenarios. We're going to have to make some hard choices. We know it won't be, the numbers will be down. The general fund appropriations will certainly be down. We do not at this time have plans for reductions in employment specifically, but our conversations within the leadership are, how do we focus on the things that Hawaii needs the most from us? And so it will be difficult. We know that. The other unknown is, as was widely publicized, the governor proposed some salary reductions. That would have been one way to adapt to lower general fund appropriations. There are other ways to make those adaptations, and I know the legislators are trying to find ways to make this as cause as little pain as possible, both to the services that we provide as well as the rest of the state government, but also as little pain as possible to public employees.
Thinking about those non-residents, non-Hawaii residents that could be coming, they will probably have to do some kind of a quarantine. Have you thought about what that actually is going to look like? And will you then stay open for all breaks so that they don't have to go and come back? I mean, how does that work?
So we've started planning that this week. Really what we announced on Monday was we put our stake in the ground as to the planning that we need to do over these 3.5 months. But we wanted to provide some certainty to our students and faculty as to what they could expect. So we are actually leveraging the capabilities that we have within the University of Hawaii. We have a medical school, we have a nursing school, we have a school of social work and public health. And so we have the capacity to do testing, contact tracing. We have rooms in our residence halls that can be used for isolation. When we didn't know what to expect for spring break, as you well know, our state has plenty of empty hotel rooms right now. Sad for the hospitality industry, but we had kind of a handshake partnership with a hotel. So if we had to isolate students, we were ready to utilize rooms in a hotel to do that with private bathrooms. So all of this can come together. My dream scenario would be that if a student arrives from somewhere else, we could quickly test them. And if they test negative, they could come right into the flow, because that's the purpose of the quarantine, is really to ensure that nobody comes in with the virus and spreads it. But there are other ways of preventing that as well. And we think we may have enough control of our campus environments to be able to do some of those things. So we are very hopeful that we'll be able to work with public health officials to find a way so that every student coming in from somewhere else does not necessarily have to go through 14-day quarantine. And of course, if they test positive, then that's exactly what we need them to do to keep them safe and those around them safe. And we'll be able to keep an eye on them so that if they develop symptoms, we will be able to ensure that they get access to the healthcare that they need.
Will you folks be expanding, the healthcare on campus? Because there are the healthcare clinics there where people can go in if they're feeling sick. Like on UH Manoa, there's that facility. Is there any effort being taken there to maybe be an area for testing and things like that if students want to get tested?
So in general, we rely on the healthcare available that our students have coming in. So we are not the primary source of healthcare for most of our students. But as I said, we do have resources available should we need to surge up. And the deans of all of our healthcare programs are now involved in our planning, and that will be part of ensuring that we have that safety net available, as well as our University Health Center, the service that you mentioned on the UH Manoa campus.
Outside of students, so many people in Hawaii are invested in UH when it comes to athletics. What are you thinking when it comes to athletics? Because there are so many issues. First of all, can contact sports continue? And how do we engage other teams outside of the islands if we have these quarantine restrictions? Is it reasonable for our athletes to travel? What are you looking at when it comes to athletics?
That one is still an open book, Yinji. One of the aspects of this one is that it's a decision that we can't make unilaterally. So every contest requires at least 2 teams. So I'm on the boards of both the Big West Conference and the Mountain West Conference. We play football in the Mountain West and most other sports in the Big West. And college and university presidents around the country are grappling with this, as are the conferences and as is the NCAA. So the NCAA released this week some guidelines on how they think intercollegiate athletics could safely resume. I think the scenarios include beginning, everything from no sports to sports without fans to sports with fans in a socially distanced manner. But, the guidelines from every governor are different as well. So thinking about what the governor of California allows his schools to do versus what our governor allows us to do. And then in the Mountain West, you throw in another 6 or 7 states, and it's a pretty complex framework to work through. So that's a work in progress that we're, in discussions. And I talk with athletics director Matlin as often as any of our deans and directors and campus heads.
Yesterday we heard a big announcement coming from the Manoa campus about the athletes and the extension of that eligibility for some of those athletes who had their seasons cut short. In that clause, though, it says that it's not necessarily going to take more money out of the scholarships, that the teams would be responsible for essentially funding each of these scholarships to remain longer. What does that mean, and how does that look like? Each team will have to basically cover the cost of each of those student athletes that would like to return?
Yeah, so in some cases they may forego incoming scholarship. In some cases they may be fundraising for those. A lot of the spring sports also, the scholarships are only partial, right? So in basketball, most of our student athletes are getting a full scholarship. That's not true in sports like volleyball, softball, some of those others. So I've been pretty clear with everybody on campus. We have a freeze in place. This is not the time to be creating new expenses for the university. We need to be finding ways to reduce expenses. But on the other hand, the passion of the state, especially for men's volleyball, presumably tomorrow we would have been playing in the national championship. So that's an opportunity that we lost this year. And the community support for some of these teams is just unbelievable. The excitement around Coach Graham and what we had expected him to do, the opportunity for some of our best volleyball players to come back and win that elusive national championship. We would like to preserve that opportunity if we can. But that said, all of this is predicated on, again, decisions by our conferences and the NCAA as to what's possible.
Yeah, let's just hope that things are sort of implemented in place so that there is a season for them to participate
Exactly.
in when that comes around.
Exactly. The spring is likely to be better than the fall. To be honest, I think we all know that. But everything I read suggests that this coronavirus is not going to be gone by spring. We won't be fully safe until there is a vaccine and there's solid treatment.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time out of your Friday to spend sort of updating us on the efforts that the University of Hawaii is taking. And as this sort of moves on, we'd love to have you back maybe in a few weeks to get an update to see what's
you know where
happening.
to find me. And for all your viewers, thank you. And apply.hawaii.edu.
There you go.
That was my next question. What is the time frame for applications? People might, like as you said, they may have lost their jobs and they're starting to think, okay, what am I going to do for the next year or so, or what's next for me?
For that reason, we actually extended our application deadlines beyond our normal, and so we're accepting applications for admission through August 1st.
All right.
Okay.
So apply.hawaii.edu.
Pretty easy to remember.
Yeah. All right. David Lassner, thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Very interesting to hear. And that athletics question that I know so many people are invested in, and just really, it's so hard to tell. And him bringing in the point that it really depends not only on the university presidents, but really on the governors of every state. So that's a complex puzzle there.
Yeah, and even just the social distancing aspect of that, if teams are allowed to participate, and then what about the fans? Are they going to be allowed to be in these stadiums? Will there be social distancing there? We also hope to at some point talk to UH Athletic Director Dave Matlin to sort of get an update. I think when things get a little bit more clear from their end. I know that there's still a lot of question marks, but going back to the other side of that, and him talking, President Lassner talking about just the classroom configurations, how they're going to manage that, and really try to help facilitate some of those teacher, professor, and student teaching mechanisms are going to look a lot different, including potentially classes outdoors. So we'll see what those things look like.
Yeah, and enrollment too, that's a big question mark. Do they get a surge of people coming in because they don't want to go back to the mainland, or will a lot of people decide to forego university for a while and do something else? So very interesting. And he has a good point. Maybe it is a time to pursue a degree. So it was apply.hawaii.edu, right?
That's right. And him talking about students coming into to Hawaii in that 14-day quarantine, and sort of transitioning that into other news. One of the new requirements will be for passengers that are arriving in Hawaii with that new implemented 14-day quarantine. They're actually going to revise that agriculture form that they were using for arriving guests and visitors to Hawaii to fill out. They're actually modifying that. Now everyone has to fill out a form. In the past, it was basically one form per household, but now they're being much more deliberate about tracking each individual. So each person will need to fill that out. They're being much more detail oriented. So that new form also taking into effect. They're also going to expect delays because of the added screening that will happen for incoming passengers. They said normally they try to get passengers that arrive out of the airport in 10 minutes. This could potentially be half an hour or more with some of these new implemented procedures that are being put in place. So a lot of that will be still fine-tuned, and I'm sure we'll see some adjustments that will be made, but also just communicating that to visiting passengers that are coming into Hawaii, knowing that this is not something that it's going to be easy. It's going to take some time for you to get cleared to get out of the airport.
Yeah, I think they want to do a much better job of tracking who is coming in. The other thing that they're adding, at least for the time being, is that you'll have to fill out that form if you're inter-island as well. That'll go away, obviously, once they lift those restrictions. But that's something that we haven't seen before. So they want to keep a much better track of where everybody is going. Something else that was announced yesterday that was unexpected was Mayor Kirk Caldwell announced a $25 million program that is funded through the CARES Act, which is federal money to help people who are in need of up to, I believe it's $1,000. Yes, here I have the numbers here, $1,000 per month for eligible household expenses, up to $500 a month for childcare expenses. Families of 4 who make more than $90,000 can qualify for these reimbursements. You've got to, of course, demonstrate financial need, and you can find all the information on how to apply at oneoahu.org. So Mayor Kirk Caldwell announcing that for Oahu residents yesterday.
Yeah, they're being very specific and clear that you have to show proof and evidence that of the impact that this pandemic has had on your occupation, on your overall budget as a family and a household. So there is some, qualifications that go into that process, but something that we'll also keep a track on to see how many people are applying for that. We hope to have the mayor back on here next week. We'll continue to keep you posted on that, so we can get more information about this program for those, because we know that a lot of parents will be looking for support in that area. Also happening next week, the lawmakers will be returning to sort of a condensed legislative session, sort of like a compressed 6 to 10 day session to advance some of the proposals to help with that $1.5 billion shortfall that the state is expecting in their budget. And so lawmakers are going to be looking at all alternatives. There was an idea floated around yesterday by Senator Thielen to actually use the CARES money that is coming in to send that $600 from that finance and that part of the money that's coming in directly to those unemployment people that are still waiting, and essentially the unemployed workers would then have to reimburse the state. So advancing the money beforehand because of that backlog that they're seeing in the unemployment benefits. So ideas like that are going to be things that have to be discussed during this condensed session as they look for ways to sort of fill the gap. Again, they're gaveling in on Monday to sort of try to fix the state budget and find ways where the state can sort of recoup and try to make adjustments where need be.
Yeah, and very interesting because they were excused. Obviously, all of a sudden, a lot of bills had crossed over. What happens to legislation that had made it through, and then now what happens because that money is gone? So we have to see how lawmakers are going to figure out what bills continue on, and just on a logistical standpoint, how they handle all that backlog.
Yeah, I think it basically starts like a special session. There's no way that the legislature is going to be able to go through that entire process of crossovers and then conferencing and try to get all that. It basically is going to be a majority package sort of deal that they're currently working on now, and sort of listing out what they're doing, having some conferencing on it. And that's the only way that you make a 3-month session into a week. And so there's going to be a lot of things, though, that are going to be left off the table. And I know a lot of projects and a lot of people and nonprofits and CIP money that are just not going to be available. But a lot of people will also be down there lobbying to show why they deserve funding, especially on those shovel-ready projects, which are part of sort of this recovery effort, as we've heard our leaders talk about before.
Yeah, and we're lucky enough that we will have Governor Ige on Monday, so we'll be asking him all about that, about the process and what will make it through and what perhaps won't. Of course, we'd like to highlight a Hawaii hero every day. We got to give a special shout out because Mother's Day is coming up, so moms are the heroes, definitely. But in addition to that, we want to tell you about the Food for Hawaii's Ohana distribution event that's happening right now at Leeward Community College. That's the map right there. They're allowing 2 to 3 households per vehicle. That's to help minimize traffic, but they are warning folks that you need to gas up if you head down there, because be prepared to wait 3 to 4 hours. It's a long wait for a lot of resources, up to 50 pounds of food. That includes produce, eggs, milk, bread. I mean, we saw just the wonderful resources that are being given out to families in need there. Humbling to see all of those people in need, thousands of people lining up. They are, I believe, giving out 4,000 packets, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Hawaii Community Foundation, Bank of Hawaii, the City and County of Honolulu, and of course, Hawaii Food Bank. So they're going to be doing more distributions like this. If you happen to miss today's distribution, we will let you know. Well, and there will be another one. And also you can always go to hawaiifoodbank.org.
That's right. Expecting, again, a lot of people. It actually opened at 10 o'clock, so we'll see how those lines look out there on the Leeward side. Also happening today, One Hawaii is continuing on with their mass distribution. We're seeing a large number of people, of course, going to these drives. This one coming specifically to Mo'iliili and the Manoa area. So for those people who are looking for masks and looking for ways, again, it's mandatory here in the city and county of Honolulu to wear these masks when you're out, especially in those essential businesses. And so they're providing an opportunity for people to have access to these masks who may not have enough. Again, recommendation is to have potentially 3 to 4 of these masks where you can rotate through and wash. And so they're going to be handing out masks that will be there. I will actually be there with a few people partnering with the Pili Group at the Bye Bye Collection. So encourage you, if you're looking for a mask, head on down there. We will be there from 4 to 6 this afternoon handing out masks with One Hawaii.
Yeah, and if you see Ryan, make sure you give him a nice big shaka. Tell him that you said
Yeah.
hi. Yeah, we appreciate everyone. Hawaii has been doing just such a tremendous job of making sure that everyone in Hawaii does in fact have a mask. So reminder, of course, it is Mother's Day. If you can't see your mother in person because, we've been told that we still need to maintain our social distance, give mom a call and wear your mask. Stay safe, everyone. We know that these numbers are looking good. We've seen these single digits for 2.5 weeks, so it's easy to get complacent, but we really need to stick it through. Now is the time more than ever to continue to abide by the restrictions so that these can be lifted as fast as possible.
That's right. And again, make sure you tune in next week. As Yanji said, we will be joined by Governor David Ige on Monday. Scott Murakami will also be joining us on Tuesday again to talk about some of the updates and changes that they've made. They seem to be making changes every day to the system. We'll talk a little bit more to him on Tuesday about some of those filing and qualification processes. And then we'll also be talking to a doctor back here from Hawaii Pacific Health on Wednesday, as well as Dr. Christina Kishimoto, the superintendent, will be back here as well next week. So another full week of lineup. We want to hear from you about the guests that you want to hear from, some of the people that, maybe you have an opportunity to ask your questions to. We want to be able to provide you the access to them and answer as many questions as we possibly can. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health, for making this possible. Yanji, happy early Mother's Day to you, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there who put up with us crazy children at times.
Aloha, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Aloha. We'll see you next week.